Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be going through our Week 7 trade targets. It's kind of hard to believe, even the NFL trade deadline is not too far away. It'll be happening in Week 9. So think about it. We're in Week 7 here. We're only a few weeks away before we could even see some players going to different teams. But this is fantasy. So Joe and I are going to provide one player each. Joe, who are you telling the people to go get?
Yeah, the player I'm going to tell people to go ahead and get is going to be wide receiver Tee Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals, and his trade value currently sits, according to the Draft Sharks trade value chart based on PPR scoring, is currently sitting at 34. That's along with the guys like Devonta Smith, Keenan Allen. You got Cortland Sutton, guys like Quentin Johnston, Chris Olave ahead of that, Zay Flowers. And then, comparable to the running back position, you got guys like Travis Etienne and Quinshon Judkins around that same value. But just comparing them to some of those wide receivers, I mean, plus given the fact that they traded for Joe Flacco, definitely seemed to give that offense a boost, even in a, not the best matchup against the Green Bay Packers on the road as well. 8 targets with Joe Flacco, had 5 catches for 62 yards, averaged 12.4 yards per catch, which was pretty nice. And just seeing that Joe Flacco is kind of providing that boost to the Cincinnati Bengals offense, possibly some more, reliable targets between him and Chase. Saw Chase really get it going in this game as well. I think, maybe people are looking to sell Tee Higgins now. He's had a really disappointing year. The Bengals do also have the third best wide receiver schedule the rest of the way. And hard to believe that you can possibly rely on, 40-year-old Joe Flacco. But, I think better days are to come for Tee Higgins in this Bengals offense.
All right, Joe, I'm going to push back a little bit on this. Now it is interesting because I'm not surprised. You have always been a Tee Higgins, part of the fan club for Tee Higgins. So I'm not surprised that you want to acquire him right now. I'll be curious if you put your money where your mouth is and try to get this guy. I think he's a guy you wanted in a lot of leagues, and he just was going for too much. You went for. I don't think. Do you even have any ownership of him in any league? I know just saying.
This year, I really didn't want him. Last year was the main.
Oh,
interesting. His value last year. This year, I didn't really, like you said, I didn't want to pay the price on him.
Yeah. So you're telling me you'd rather. Who are the guys again? For those who are listening, and for me again.
I mean,
who would you be trading?
I mean, I'd rather have Tee Higgins over Devonta Smith, Keenan Allen. Those two guys mainly. Once you get to Cortland Sutton, it's an interesting one. Cortland Sutton is the main target for the Broncos, but they do like to spread the ball around. But it's kind of a question there. But even possibly
and you said for the running backs, you would trade Quinshon Judkins. You're saying?
No, I was just giving people some similar value. I wouldn't necessarily do that. I mean, I wouldn't trade Judkins for Tee Higgins. But I would just say even a guy like Chris Olave or Zay Flowers, I'd rather have Tee Higgins then for sure.
Interesting. Okay, so you're not going too far up. Chase was honestly the bigger benefactor than.
Well, he always will be, but I mean, Tee Higgins though it is the wide receiver 2 in the offense and usually performs pretty well. He's still healthy, remarkably. So I think with the Joe Flacco revamp in this offense, I think there's still production for both Chase and Tee Higgins in this offense.
I do think that, and honestly, it's interesting we did not plan for this. Mine is more so a buy high. Yours is kind of a buy low. I think there are a lot of people who are probably ready just to discard Tee Higgins at this point. If he has, I don't think people would have released him, but I think people, if they drafted him, are very disappointed. So if there is some glimmer of hope with Joe Flacco, maybe they would have been like, okay, pump the brakes. I'm going to see how it goes. He did okay, didn't do great. So this might be the opportunity that if he does go off, this is the time you really should try to acquire him, I think.
That was kind of my thoughts. I mean, just seeing how low his values dipped compared to where it was at the start of the season. Like you said, with Burrow going down, he's been really disappointing. Browning just hasn't been cutting it, but to see the little bit of a spike with the first game of Joe Flacco, if the Tee Higgins owner doesn't necessarily buy it, I think it could be a good time to go ahead and get him.
I do think one thing to note to your favor in this is that Mike Gesicki, I think, suffered a significant injury. Not to say he's been that big of a factor, but that's targets, right? So
Yeah.
that might mean that there may be more targets for Tee Higgins. Maybe it means more Noah Fant. We'll see. Chase Brown is not as involved as we thought that he may be. I think I was spooked by him. I think you were kind of spooked by him too, if I'm not mistaken.
I was interested in him. Just
Okay.
people wanted him at a high value. I just wasn't ultimately willing to pay, and at that price, I wanted other guys. Being that I went more studs and duds in other leagues and did that more this year, I just prioritized other guys over Chase Brown. I wasn't necessarily avoiding him, but really kind of honestly can say I'm pretty happy I don't have him anywhere. And I did honestly think about possibly mentioning him as a possible trade target, but same time, I was disappointed. I thought Joe Flacco coming was going to create more opportunities for Chase Brown in the receiving game, and only saw 2 targets in the passing game, which I was kind of surprised about. So that's why I kind of shifted to the wide receivers. Like I said, third best rest of the season schedule for the Bengals.
I think Tee Higgins was a better call than Chase Brown, in my
Yeah.
opinion. All right, so I kind of gave a little bit of a spoiler. This is going to be a buy high, so don't throw your tomatoes at me. It's going to be running back Cam Skattebo of the New York Giants. I didn't really know what to expect with Tyrone Tracy coming back from injury. I think there were some, I had seen it because, when you're on X, people want to hold you accountable for what you post. Joe, you and I don't really post all that much, so maybe if we did, we would be held more accountable as well. I'm sure. I know I would be. But when it comes down to it, there were some who thought that Tyrone Tracy would become more involved, and boy, was that just not the case. I mean, Skattebo against the Eagles, which I thought was a pretty difficult opponent, and it didn't turn out to be that way. 19 attempts, 98 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 2 targets, 2 catches for 12 yards. I think the thing I like about Skattebo is he back in college, his tape. I love this tape and that he was a great receiver out of the backfield. I mean, he's a bruiser as a runner, but he's underrated as a receiver. So to me, there's a lot to like about Cam Skattebo, and you look at the snap percentages for the game. This is where I thought was really interesting, and maybe this changes over time as Tyrone Tracy gets more healthy. But if you look at the game, Skattebo 71% of the snaps compared to Tyrone Tracy, who had 30% of the snaps. So I mean, it really wasn't even close. When you look at the trade value, he did jump pretty high, according to the Draft Shark trade value chart here. He has a 39. But if you're telling me I could trade away someone like Xavier Worthy, who's the exact same value for Cam Skattebo, I'm taking him. Even a guy like Bucky Irving or Breece Hall or even Kyron Williams, who are above him, I think I like Cam Skattebo there as well. I really think that, with the Malik Neighbors going down, the Giants don't really have a lot of offense to work with. I think you're going to have to rely on Skattebo going forward here. So, and really, this is all about Dayball showing the ownership that, there's promise to be had in the future and to keep him. He wants to showcase Jackson Dart. He wants to showcase Skattebo. That's going to be the type of players, and if them performing well, that's going to allow him to keep his job.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, if he's relying on the play of Skattebo and Jackson Dart to keep his job, I mean, things are looking pretty good for him because the only thing was, I mean, I said it from the jump. I mean, Jackson Dart really should have been the week 1 starter. I didn't understand them, starting rolling out Russell Wilson, saying he was going to need some time. Well, then the time ran out after 3 weeks. I mean, that showed me that they truly didn't have a plan for Jackson Dart. But nonetheless, I mean, yeah,
Joe, but that might have been. Hold on, though. That might have been a divide in the ownership, though. I hear what you're saying. It seemed as though Dayball, from what I could gather, I think he would have wanted to start Jackson Dart week 1, but I think there might have been some, scuttlebutt between, whether it was Joe Shane or John Mara or whatever. I don't know. I think if Dayball had the option, I think he would have started Dart week 1.
Yeah, maybe he does. I mean, either that or he should have fought harder because, Giants would have been so much more exciting to watch week one. Could have, seen what it was going to be like with Malik Neighbors and Dart going forward. I know that the ownership group and them didn't expect Neighbors to go down, but it happened nevertheless. But for Cam Skattebo, I do think, if they're, I'd be willing to buy him high, honestly. And, Xavier Worthy is interesting because we'll see how his value ends up getting impacted here now that Rashee Rice comes back into that offense, where he will be the wide receiver one for the Chiefs now. So that would be interesting, and might want to just get Cam Skattebo now because I'm actually nervous as a Broncos fan about facing Cam Skattebo, just how tough a physical runner he is. Broncos, are hit or miss. I feel like with whether or not they are good at playing the run or not. So a guy like Jonathan Taylor was the RB1 on the week when they faced the Colts, and they don't have any linebackers that can cover. Like you said, he's an underrated wide receiver. So might be best just to get him ahead of the Broncos matchup this week versus waiting.
Yeah, and I think too, people might think like, are you nuts? He just got 3 touchdowns. Who in their right mind would trade them? If trade and more than likely, maybe they don't. But there might be some, managers out there that say, is that a farce? Do I really think that he's going to continue this, or am I going to sell high and get as much as I can? I think that there is a possibility for that. And if not, you check and see what you could do. I mean, look, at the end of the day, uh, here we go. Get ready. Buckle up, Joe. This might be crazy what I'm about to say. You got a guy like Saquon Barkley. The Eagles' offense is completely broken. I'm not saying you do a 1-for-1, but what says you can't, because of the name value of Saquon, what says you can't get Cam Skattebo plus? Whatever that looks like, whether that's another running back or a quality receiver. You never really necessarily want to trade for value. You want to go for the best player in the deal. But honestly, if Skattebo keeps going, I think he could be a fringe RB1 the rest of the way. Saquon, I just don't know what's going on with that Eagles offense. I'm just throwing that out there as a name. Again, I'm not saying to do a 1-for-1, but I don't think that you would need to. I think it would make sense that you would be able to get more. Get Skattebo plus there.
Yeah, I think even with a name you threw out earlier, a guy like Kyron Williams, could you get Kyron, like you trade for Kyron for Skattebo and possibly a lower end running back or mid tier wide receiver. I do think that is an option as well, where maybe you trade a couple of guys for Skattebo, and you just don't know like what people's records are and who's owning Cam Skattebo. Given the situation, like if people need multiple players and, want to just, they're not winning with Cam Skattebo even after a 3-touchdown performance. Some people just need depth and it doesn't matter, and multiple players can help them more. So I don't think it's not out of the question, even though yes, people might say you're crazy for suggesting trade for a guy after a 3-touchdown performance, but that also, like you said, doesn't mean that everyone buys it. And I'd say mostly everyone is able to be acquired. It's just a matter of, what's the price.
Yeah, and especially this year, right? It seems like this fantasy season has been a ton of injuries this year. So why not go for depth at this point? Which, I'm more of the mindset of try to, bundle up, a couple players to see if you can't get a really good one. But in this year, maybe you do the opposite, honestly.
Yeah, with the injuries, it certainly in most cases would have been better off trading a top end guy for a couple for sure.
So that does it for this episode. We went through our Week 7 trade targets. Joe and I provided one each for you to go out there, reach out to the manager in your league, see if you can't acquire those players that we talked about in this episode. If you haven't done so already, check out our most recent episode. If you like IDP, we went through our IDP waiver wire pickups. You're not going to want to miss that. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.